Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are officially halfway through the college football regular season here, done with week number 7. We do have the updated AP top 25 poll to get to, and Texas remains at number 1. I'm a little surprised at how almost seemingly unanimous it is. 56 first place votes, only 6 for Oregon. Oregon clearly has the better win. The problems with Oregon lie within their first few games. They really struggled with an FCS team in week 1, and they struggled in week 2. Boise State's a good team, but they barely won that game. So you can kind of understand the analytics don't love Oregon. I guess Texas at number 1, but there's a lot of people that have said, well, Texas is clear number 1 and then it's everyone else. Texas really doesn't have an amazing win. That win against Michigan on the road, it's not that impressive. Michigan's just not very good this year. So I think really college football in general is kind of like a mosh pit at the top. But Texas, according to people, they are the clear number 1 team, with Oregon having the better win, but having a little bit worse start to the season at number 2. All of this won't matter. We'll see what happens with Texas against Georgia. If they win, they will solidify themselves as the number 1 team. If they lose to Georgia, obviously they're going to drop. You do have Penn State at or I guess I'll talk about Oregon. So Oregon at number 2, beating Ohio State. They are in the driver's seat to go to at least make the Big Ten championship. Maybe it's going to be a rematch with Ohio State, but Dylan Gabriel looked very good. I would say they outplayed Ohio State. I mean, you could argue at the end, Ohio State, they were close to scoring. They were at the 28. They could have kicked a potential walk-off game-winning field goal. You had the ticky-tack pass interference call on Jeremiah Smith. But to be fair, Oregon was just more efficient than Ohio State. Ohio State had a very, very bad defensive performance. Oregon's offensive line was amazing against OSU's defensive line, and it was a very good performance. They were at home, but still a very good performance. They were 3-point underdogs. They ended up winning 32-31. Really fun game there. And I don't want to say they're guaranteed to make the playoff, but beating Ohio State, that's a huge win. Even if they lose 2 games, you've already got the win against OSU, and it's the 12-team playoff, so you have margin for error. So they're almost locked into a playoff spot at this point. The only question is, will they win the Big Ten, possibly in a rematch with Ohio State, beat them again? That's going to be very hard. Or is it a situation where they end up losing to Ohio State in the rematch and they get that number 5 or that number 6 overall slot, which honestly might be better than being the number 2 team, even if you get a bye? Because, well, I don't know, honestly, because if you are at number 5, you're going to face Boise State. You could say Boise State, they might be better than we think. It'll be interesting. You do have Penn State at number 3. I think by default, just they're unbeaten, so they're at number 3 at this point. I don't know, man. I'm surprised Penn State is as high as they are. They were losing to USC that entire game. They came back. Tyler Warren, over 200 yards for a tight end is pretty crazy. But they outgained USC by over 100 yards, had over 500 yards of total offense. It was a gritty win in overtime, but I think Penn State is going to lose to Ohio State, even though they get them at home. That's going to be a really good game in a few weeks. But Penn State also has a few other tough games. They're on the road at Wisconsin. Wisconsin's been a lot better. So we'll see with Penn State, but I think even if Penn State loses 2 games, they're probably on track. Although I don't know. I'm not sure exactly who their big wins would be if they lose to like Wisconsin and Ohio State. They very likely have to go like 11-1. It gets really weird with the tiebreakers because if Ohio State finishes 11-1, Penn State finishes 11-1, Oregon finishes 11-1, who makes it? It's kind of weird, but I guess we'll just have to see. Ohio State down to number 4. So the question was, would Ohio State drop to 4 or 5? And they're, pretty clearly you look at the points, they've got 57 more total points than Georgia. A lot of this has to do with Georgia just really struggling. Georgia lost to Alabama, then Alabama has had 2 shaky performances, and then on top of that, Georgia has struggled against Auburn and now Mississippi State. They allowed 31 points to Mississippi State at home when they were 33-point favorites or something like that. So, Ohio State, it's a tough loss, but you only lost by 1 point against a top 5 team in the country on the road. You're not going to drop too far, and analytically, Ohio State is still loved. They're the number 2 team in the country, according to basically every analytical system behind Texas. So I'm not surprised Ohio State's at number 4, and you got Georgia at number 5. This won't matter in a week. If Georgia beats Texas, they're going to move in front of Ohio State. If they lose to Texas, obviously they're going to have 2 losses and move significantly lower. Miami had a bye week, so they're staying at number 6. They are undefeated, but they've had some, some of those performances, like the game against Cal, the targeting call, but they're still at number 6. You could say they're in the driver's seat in the ACC. I think Clemson's just straight up a better team than Miami, but we'll see. Alabama's still at number 7. So Alabama, another shaky performance. I will say South Carolina has an amazing defensive line. They do, but Jalen Milroe was not good in that game. The accuracy was just not there. I don't think Alabama necessarily has an elite running game. You have to rely on Milroe doing QB keepers, and I don't know, man. Alabama's defense hasn't been unbelievable. It's one of those years in the SEC. I could see Alabama losing 3 games and missing the playoff outright. They beat South Carolina by 2. South Carolina outgained them in this game. Alabama had a bunch of negative plays because of that South Carolina defensive line, but Alabama does hang on to win. You do have LSU up 5 spots. Pretty fun game against Ole Miss. They were losing 10-0. They were losing throughout most of this game. They come back and they win 29-26. Brutal loss for Ole Miss, crippling. They were coming into this game slight favorites. And LSU, I'm still not buying LSU, honestly. I mean, to me, LSU, the SEC is just such a mosh pit right now, but I don't think LSU is going to make the playoff. I guess we'll see. They did lose in week 1 to USC, and then they've come back with 5 straight wins, including a win against Ole Miss. It's impressive, but we will have to see. You do have Iowa State at number 9, so Iowa State, that's a good win on the road at West Virginia. You know, that could have been an upset potential, but Iowa State, they've got a really good defense. Matt Campbell, seemingly they're back. They had a few years where Iowa State was pretty down, but they're at 6-0, the Big 12. I mean, I can't really trust Iowa State, but right now they're the number 1 team in that conference. Clemson stays at number 10. They throttled Wake Forest. They easily covered another spread. It was like a 20-point spread. They came out of that. I think they were losing 7-0 or something. They scored like 21 points in the span of like 5 minutes in the second quarter and then scored 2 touchdowns early in the third quarter. Clemson is just playing really good football right now. Tennessee down 3 spots. Tennessee continues to struggle on offense early in games. They almost lost to Florida. They scored some late touchdowns. They end up winning 23-17. But yeah, Tennessee, they've got Alabama. Both Tennessee and Alabama seemingly struggling right now. Tennessee is hosting that game. It'll be interesting. The loser of that game, I think, is pretty much done. You get 2 losses, and it's not like either of those 2 teams are playing that great. Anyways, Notre Dame down 1 spot after destroying Stanford. That's a very impressive, dominant performance by Notre Dame. That was a weird game. There was like a weather delay or something, but even in that game, I think Stanford went up 7-0 early, and then Notre Dame just throttled them. So it's a good win for Notre Dame. Why they moved down a spot, I really don't know. I mean, they were like 20-point favorites or 25-point favorites or whatever, and they won by 42. They should not move down, but it is what it is. BYU sitting at 6-0. They moved up a single spot, so they got another win against Arizona. Very impressive performance. Arizona's kind of had a letdown year this year. They're not as good as we thought, but still, BYU is 6-0. They're the clear number 2 team right now in the Big 12 behind Iowa State. You could even argue maybe they're better than Iowa State because the Big 12 is such a mosh pit. A&M moves up 1 spot. Believe they had a bye week. They had that huge win against Missouri, and then they had a bye week, so A&M sitting at number 14. They've got the huge rivalry at the end of the year against Texas. So the Battle of Texas, Texas A&M versus Texas. A&M is hosting that game at Kyle Field, so I think A&M's probably going to lose again, though, before that. They might lose a few times. We'll have to see, but that's going to be a crazy matchup at the end of the year, you know, considering how good Texas is. Boise State up 2 spots. They beat Hawaii 28-7. Pretty good defensive performance by Boise State. Ashton Jeanty, obviously the huge story this year. Boise State only 1 loss, and that 1 loss was a 3-point loss on the road in Eugene at Oregon. Oregon, the number 2 team in college football. So very, very good for Boise State. Their resume is obviously not going to be good in the Mountain West, but they do have a game against UNLV on the road in a few weeks. That could be a nice resume builder. UNLV is like a fringe top 25 team. So Boise State at this point, the clear favorite to be the Group of 5 representative in the playoff as the number 12 seed. You do have Indiana sitting at number 16. They moved up 2 spots. So yeah, kind of interesting. They beat Northwestern 41-24, and then Northwestern throttled Maryland. So that might be a little bit of a better win than we thought for Indiana. I did not think Northwestern would beat Maryland like 37-10, but Northwestern moved up significantly in terms of analytics, which will help Indiana because Indiana beat Northwestern. But Indiana, I mean, they still haven't faced a great team. They honestly could go 11-1 with their only loss being at Ohio State because they get Michigan at home. I think they have a relatively manageable schedule outside of the Ohio State game on the road. Maybe they go 11-1. What if they're 10-2? I don't think they'll make the playoff if they're 10-2, but they'll be like, I mean, they'll have an outside chance at possibly getting in. I think they do have to go 11-1 though. Kansas State sitting at number 17. They beat Colorado. Real gritty performance. Colorado's a solid team. Say what you want about them with Dion and everything, but they have a talented roster that's on the road, that's in a very hostile environment in Boulder. It's a quality win. And it was a game where they were up early. They were up pretty much throughout it. Colorado took a late lead, and then Kansas State with a touchdown to win by 3 there. They're at number 17. There's another team in the Big 12 that could win that conference. Ole Miss down to number 18. It's a crippling loss. That almost knocks them out of the playoff picture just because they have other tough games. I know they have a game at Arkansas. They've got another tough game other than that, and they are down 9 spots. So Ole Miss, that was brutal. That was a game you have to win, especially in the SEC like that at LSU. You're slight favorites. You've already lost one game. Really, they should have 0 losses going into this game, but they got upset a few weeks ago, and then they lose this game at LSU. Missouri at number 19, they beat UMass, kind of a weird game, traveling to Massachusetts. 45-3, they covered that spread. They're at number 19. They got crushed by A&M a few weeks ago. That's why they got knocked way down. Pittsburgh is undefeated. They barely beat California. They didn't cover a 3.5-point spread. Cal missed a late, makeable kick. I don't think Pittsburgh's very good. We'll see, though. They are 6-0. SMU is 5-1. SMU has a very easy schedule. It would not surprise me at all if SMU, worst case, finished 10-2, probably 11-1. They could make the ACC championship based off of their schedule. Illinois moves up a spot. That's not a good performance at all for Illinois, beating Purdue 50-49. Purdue is considered the worst team in the Big Ten. Now, maybe not after this performance, but that was, they were like 19-point favorites against Purdue. They nearly lost that game. They were on the verge of losing it. They came back, give them credit. But they get Michigan this week at home. That's probably going to be a game in which Illinois is the slight underdog in when you look at the analytics. And then how about this? Army is ranked. They crush UAB. They cover another spread. And Navy is ranked at number 25 with Michigan still at number 24. Well, again, Michigan is at Illinois this coming week. Army and Navy both ranked, which is pretty cool to see. Navy had a bye. Army crushed UAB there. And then you do have others receiving votes. You've got Vanderbilt getting 68 votes. It's because Vanderbilt has 2 losses. They beat Kentucky by like a touchdown, but I can understand them not being ranked because they have 2 losses. And one of them's like against Georgia State. Nebraska getting 62 votes. Yeah, so Nebraska, I don't know who they face this next week, but after that they face Ohio State. So that's going to be a tough game for them. If they somehow win it, obviously they'll be inside the top 15. Arizona State's had a very nice year. They had that Friday night win against Utah. Oklahoma, they're just so beat up at receiver at this point. Washington State, Washington State, they're going to have a relatively easy schedule with what happened to the Pac-12 and facing all the Mountain West teams. Iowa had a very nice win against Washington. Of course, they got crushed by Ohio State last week, but they bounced back. Texas Tech has had a nice year. I think they had a bye week. Syracuse got another win at NC State by touchdown. Arkansas is an interesting team. Utah should not be ranked. Louisville gets 6 votes. USC at 3-3. USC's had some brutally close losses, and they've got to win against LSU, so you can understand that. But they're 3-3. Nobody's going to rank them. Liberty and UNLV. I would say Liberty is undefeated, but they've got such a ridiculously easy schedule. There's no way you can rank them. UNLV's a solid team, but the recent loss that they had, they lost to Syracuse. That pretty much killed them. This is just the updated look at the top 25. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.